How are you guys today? Good. All right, so I'm going to teach you guys today about the healthcare delivery system as well as legal issues in nursing. And after the legal PowerPoint, I have a case study for you guys to go over. So, can anybody tell me where healthcare is provided? Where do we provide healthcare?
Hospital, like,
Yeah, definitely. Any others? Yeah, absolutely. Urgent cares? Yeah, absolutely. You guys covered a lot of them. So we have primary care centers where you see your primary care doctor. You have hospitals, home health centers. So sometimes we have skilled nursing rehabs, extended care facilities. We have services for the seriously ill and dying. So you might have heard that people do hospice at home, which is true. They also have hospice centers for people. There are ambulatory care, so urgent cares, specialized care centers like oncology or orthopedics, and then extended care like the skilled nursing facilities. You might also hear of something called voluntary facilities. So those are facilities that are privately paid. They are not governmentally funded at all. They're all private donations or fundraisers. Have you guys heard of Meals on Wheels before? Yeah, so Meals on Wheels provides meals to elderly, and they are completely fundraised. They are not funded by the government or the state. That's in comparison to our government facilities like the VA hospital here in Leeds. They are completely 100% government paid for. Then we also have religious facilities. So these are facilities that are paid for by churches or religious organizations. Now we'll talk about who's part of the healthcare team. There's a few listed here on the board, but this is not nearly everybody. This is just kind of like a general overview of who you'll probably see in specifically hospitals. So we have physicians. So physicians are the ones treating the patients. They're the ones putting in orders for us nurses to follow through with. Underneath them, there's APRNs and physician's assistants. These are called mid-level providers. Mid-level providers are also able to put in orders. Oftentimes, they're under overseen by the physician, but sometimes they can practice independently depending on like where they are. We have nurses, which is going to be us. We're the ones carrying out the orders, making sure patients are safe. We have pharmacists. So pharmacists are really important in reviewing medications, looking at all the medications that the doctors are ordering. They work in outpatient and inpatient settings. We have dietitians. So dietitians are super important in managing patients' meal plans. They also provide education to outpatient patients as well. So that way they can teach patients about, cardiac diets, diabetic diets, all that kind of stuff. Then we have physical therapists and occupational therapists, which are actually two different things. So, physical therapists focus on the overall body and they help restore general function and prevent further disability, especially after staying in a hospital or in a longer term care facility. While occupational therapists help with the day to day life stuff and practicing your ADLs, your activities of daily living. It's more of the fine motor things. We have speech therapists. So, specifically in the hospital, speech therapists are super helpful with stroke patients who may have lost their speech after having a stroke. They're also specially trained to help deaf or hard of hearing patients as well. We have social workers. So, social workers are super important because they can help assist patients with their social, emotional, environmental problems that may prevent them from going back home after spending some time in the hospital or an extended care facility. And they also have a lot of community resources that you can help them use as a nurse. Respiratory therapists obviously is really important for our pulmonary health, and then chaplains. Not all facilities have chaplains, but they're super helpful with our spiritual care. As nurses, we might have patients who want spiritual help, and we can call in chaplains to help with that. Some facilities pay their chaplains, some don't.
these are all examples of your interprofessional team. Okay, so when you're trying to develop your plan of care, make sure that you're outsourcing to these departments. They can help you so that you don't feel overwhelmed having to try to figure out everything for your patients
As
and let them do
nurses,
their jobs.
yeah, as nurses, you're going to know a lot of things, but you're not going to have all of the answers. These people will have answers for you because they specialize in those things. So let's talk about the IHI triple aim. So in your book, you'll see that, and basically it is the Institute of Healthcare Improvement. Their job is to use evidence-based practice to help improve methods in our healthcare world. As a result of that, we're going to improve our health and healthcare outcomes and hopefully overall patient health. So basically, there's the three triangles. There's improving health in general of our population, lowering the costs it is to receive healthcare, and then overall just provide better care in general. There's also a fourth aim that some people talk about, and that fourth aim recognizes the difficulties that us as healthcare workers experience while trying to provide good care to these patients. It was a really important concept during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of nurses, a lot of doctors, physicians, they were getting really, really burnt out because we had an influx of patients and we couldn't keep up with the demands of that. So this fourth aim just kind of focuses on the struggles that the healthcare providers might face. So let's talk about access to healthcare. So access isn't necessarily equal for everybody. Access depends largely on our ability to pay for services as well as the availability of services in our area. So there's four ways to pay for healthcare. There's out-of-pocket pay, so you do not have insurance and you have to pay for everything, cash, card kind of thing. You have government insurance, so you either have like Medicare or Medicaid, and that's provided solely by the government. Then there's employer-based insurance. So you work for a hospital, they offer you health insurance, and you buy that health insurance, and they help you pay for your healthcare needs. And then we have private insurance. So private insurance is you chose not to get your employer-based insurance, but you get your insurance elsewhere, and they help you pay with your healthcare costs. Like I said, access to healthcare is not equal everywhere. We have stuff called healthcare or medical deserts. So it's really common out in the Midwest where there's like no doctor's offices, no hospitals, like they don't have access to anything. So these patients are really struggling to help find healthcare. Um, Western Mass, we have a lot of good options, but Upper Western Mass, like where I'm from, there's no doctor's office, there's no hospitals. It takes 45 minutes for us to get to the nearest hospital up there. So those are kind of healthcare deserts. Then we have the PPACA, which is also known as the Affordable Care Act, and what that is it's patient protection, and it basically provides insurance or Medicaid to people who qualify for it. In order to qualify for it, you need to make below 100% of the poverty line. You need to be a U.S. citizen. You basically just can't afford insurance in general, and they're going to help you pay for it. Has anybody heard of the health insurance marketplace? Yeah. So I'd never heard of it before this, and I think it's super, super helpful. Basically, what it does is it's designed to help families, small businesses, or individuals look for insurance. You might not have any idea how to get insurance, and this is uh, a program that helped you break down different insurance plans and find what's best for your budget and your needs. If you have higher healthcare needs, they're going to help you find the insurance company and insurance coverage that works best for you. You can look at it online. You can call about it over the phone. There's also in-person programs that you can go to that they can help you do it. The benefit of the marketplace is it provides 100% coverage for these people that need it. And as of 2015, the total number of uninsured individuals have decreased because of this program. So hopefully, as we progress, that number all continues to decrease. In your book, there's a whole page dedicated to the RCAM, which is the Reliable Care Accountability Matrix. And basically, what that is sets a standardized set of patient care plans, and it defines the clinical processes for specific outcomes of those eight things listed on the screen there. And it's important to nurses because we're the ones providing care in regards to those eight outcomes. So, for example, with CAUTIs, so that stands for catheter associated urinary tract infection. We're the ones as nurses placing those catheters. So, we want to make sure when we're doing that, we're doing it with sterile technique. We're doing it like the way we're taught to. Because if we're able to do that, we're going to decrease the risk of infections. So, that's why the RCAM kind of matters to us as nurses. Now let's go over three terms that I want you guys to know. On the screen, there's the book definitions, and I'll kind of give you a breakdown of each one. First, we have high reliability organizations. These organizations are operating at like a high complex or high hazard situation, and they what they do is they avoid failures, and they do so by anticipating the failures that might occur, and they detect them, and they respond to them in an appropriate manner and timely, and it makes sure we avoid catastrophic issues. These facilities are also referred to as magnet hospitals. Magnet hospitals are really good hospitals to receive care at. They're also really good hospitals to work at because they care about not only their patients, but they also care about their staff. Next, we have pay for performance. So these are financial incentives for providers. And basically, what that does is we offer incentives to meet certain goals. So at Holyoke Medical Center, in the ER where I work, we have incentives to meet our sepsis goals. So if us as nurses, we are taking our blood pressures and we're administering antibiotics within the timeframes they want, we get paid for it. I get extra money in my paycheck if we meet those goals. So some facilities offer those options. And then finally, we have value-based purchasing. So basically, this bases the provider's pay, what we pay the doctors, on their quality and outcomes of care rather than the sheer amount of patients they're seeing and the services they're providing. We want providers to offer better care rather than more care, basically. So in healthcare, there's two avenues of finance, the money coming in, the money coming out. That's how finance works. First, we have the collection of money. So that's you guys paying your bills. You pay for your primary care appointment, you pay for your lab services. Then we also have the money going out. So after we pay for our stuff, the government has to pay the providers for providing us the services. So that's the money going out to them. It's a back and forth system. There's two systems that could be potentially used for payment. First is the multi-payer system, which is what the United States currently uses. And basically, it's where private insurance companies and the government pay the United States for healthcare. The United States currently spends about 17 to 18% of their entire gross domestic product on healthcare, which is actually the most they've ever spent on it in time. So the other option is a single payer system. So some people believe that a single payer system might work a little bit better because only one person is managing money. Therefore, there's a less of an opportunity for money to get lost. So, because the government is stingy and they want to save money as many ways as they can, they try to work to find different ways to decrease the expenses. Your book kind of details different changes in reimbursement and regulatory environments, which doesn't super apply to nurses, but what does apply to nurses is our changes in care delivery. So, this changes the way that we deliver care to our patients and we're able to carry out our day-to-day activities. So, as I discussed before, we spend a lot of money on healthcare in the US. Um, we spend about 51% of our healthcare spending on not only hospitals, but doctors' offices. So, that's a lot of money. However, in the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually decreased that spending because we are encouraging patients not to go to their doctors unless they truly needed to. Oh, goodness, things breaking. So if patients weren't going to their doctors, they're obviously not, the money's not coming in for it. There's three levels of healthcare that I want you guys to focus on. First one is primary. So that's where we're seeing the majority of our patients. That's our primary cares, urgent cares, and employee health centers. You're going there for sore throats, you're going there for headaches, you're going there to get screening done, you're to get cleared for sports, that kind of stuff. The second one is the secondary level, and that is like hospitals, emergency departments. You're having an acute issue like a heart attack or abdominal pain that needs to be, reviewed. That's the more you need more clinical expertise than just a basic go through. Then finally, you have your tertiary care center. So that's like rare, complex diseases such as cancers. You're going to cancer centers, you're getting longer term care for that. So, why is nursing reform important? We want to, help shape what our futures look like, right? So nurses can help make a difference in many different ways. So the first is to stay up to date with current practices. We want to constantly looking at evidence-based practice in our fields. We are going to be continually educating ourselves on what's going on so we can stay the best up to date we can. You can participate in nursing organizations such as the MNA, the Massachusetts Nursing Association, and they're really heavily involved in Congress and legislation. Right now, you might see a lot about safe staffing and patient ratios. They're really heavily involved in that, and that's going to affect your future nursing practice. You should be documenting the outcomes of your nursing care in your facility. If you feel like there's deficits in your nursing care, document that and bring that to your hospital leadership. You can join committees at your hospital that can help design and implement new healthcare outcomes. That way, it provides better care overall for your patients. You want to advocate for your patient's safety as well as yours. So, um, as you go through nursing, you're going to want to focus on a lot of trends. There are a couple trends that are like forefront right now. Right now, it's focused on preventative care. So we're trying to focus on stress management, exercise and fitness programs, nutritional awareness, because the healthier we make our patients now, the healthier they're going to be throughout their lifetime and the less sick care they're going to need. Next, we have knowledgeable and engaged consumers. So the consumer is our patient, and we're the ones educating them. As nurses, our job is to educate patients to our best of our abilities. And if patients are knowledgeable about their conditions, they can make better informed decisions about their health care in the end. Next, we have mobile health. So, as we've moved on throughout time, we have moved to a more online platform of healthcare. So, we use electronic health records now. We use telehealth visits, especially after COVID. So, we're just going to be including a lot more technology throughout our time in nursing. So, just kind of stay on top of that. Here's a couple more trends to keep your eyes on. I really want to focus specifically on the shortage of key healthcare professionals, specifically nurse educators. Right now, there's a lack of nurse educators in the world. So the less nurse educators there are, the less of you guys. Because if there's not enough people to teach you guys, we have to accept less students into the nursing programs, and less students in nursing programs puts less nurses out into the workforce. So I encourage you guys after you graduate with your bachelor's to continue education, potentially think about teaching, that kind of stuff, because it's really going to help make sure our nursing profession stays open and ready for all the patients we might need. Do you guys have any questions about the healthcare delivery system? No? No. We're going to move into legal issues of nursing. So there's a couple things we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about important terms you might hear about in the legal side of nursing stuff. We're going to talk about torts, which is really important, so I'd pay attention to that. HIPAA, malpractice, our nursing practice, and who gets to oversee our nursing practice, malpractice in general. We talk about protecting your license and reasons you might lose your license, and then the process for losing your license. We're going to talk about our place in the nursing legal process, laws that affect our practice, and then just student liability at the end. So first, we have all of the terms in your book listed here. I'll kind of go over a more shortened version of it. So for laws, laws are basically meant to protect us as people and us as nurses. If they're a set of guidelines, and if they are broken, we can be punished for them. Just like regular people on the street can be punished for breaking laws, we can too as nurses. The defendant's the one being accused of something in court, and the plaintiff is the opposite. They're the ones doing the accusing in court. We have a litigation, which is just the process of bringing somebody to court over something. And then we have tort. So a tort is a wrong committed against a person or a person's property that's subject to active action in a civil court. There's a difference between a tort and a crime. So a tort is against an individual. A crime is against society. So just keep that in the back of your head. Talking a little bit more about torts, we have unintentional, intentional, and within those we have different subsections. So for unintentional, we have negligence and malpractice. Negligence is pretty simple. It's either you are doing something as a nurse that a reasonable nurse wouldn't do, or you're doing something or you're not doing something as a nurse that a reasonable nurse would do. We have malpractice. So there's six failures that could be falling under malpractice. First is to follow standards of care in your facility. Failure to use the equipment in a responsible manner, or if you're using equipment without having proper education on it. Failure to assess and monitor your patient when necessary. Failure to communicate with the patient, with family members, with colleagues, with doctors, especially if there's changes in your patient's status. There's failure to document. So if you did something and you didn't document it, it didn't exist. If you gave a med and you didn't document that, that's failure to document. And then failure to act as a patient advocate or to follow the chain of command. And then on the opposite side, we have intentional torts. So the first one is A and B, so assault and battery. Assault is a threat or an attempt to cause bodily harm. You're not actually causing bodily harm, but the patient's coming up into you and threatening that they're gonna mess you up. Battery is the actual assault that's carried out. So they actually go and hit you. We have defamation of character, which is slander. Then we have invasion of privacy. So that's you entering charts without any need to enter the charts. It's why a lot of hospitals have cybersecurity departments and they're constantly making sure people aren't hacking into stuff. They're also watching your actions. If you're clicking into charts and you don't have that patient as a patient, that's an invasion of privacy. We have false imprisonment, which is super important in regards to restraints, which is something you'll cover in mental health. And then we have fraud. How many of you guys have heard of HIPAA? Fantastic. It was really important. So before 2002, patients didn't have protected rights. Now they do. And it's really important for nurses to know about HIPAA because we have a really intimate knowledge of patient information. We're able to access their charts when they're there. We're able to access their history. We're able to see previous visits to like the hospital, say. We can see pretty much everything about them. So that opens us up to a whole slew of legal issues if we choose to share that or unintentionally share it. If we violate HIPAA, you can be fined up to $250,000 or up to 10 years in jail or both. So be very careful with what you're sharing with other individuals. Like I said, HIPAA includes invasion of privacy. So if your nursing friend goes, "Hey, come look at this chart. I want to look at this certain thing." You can't do that because you're not taking care of them. Patients have the right to see a copy of their health record. They have a bunch of rights listed there. And basically, what HIPAA does is it allows patients to have control over their medical record and who it's shared to. A lot of facilities use what's called an ROI, a release of information. And basically, it's a form that patients are able to fill out and say, "Hey, yep, I'm cool with you giving information about me to another hospital, my family member, my friend." Whoever they really want, they can sign their name into it, and that gives you permission to share their information. HIPAA is really important for you guys too as students because once you enter clinicals, you got to be careful with what you're looking at, who you're talking about. Don't go talking about patients in the hallway because people can hear stuff. Just be very careful about what you're sharing. I'm going to bounce back to malpractice for just a moment. So there's three potential outcomes with malpractice claims. First is parties can work towards a fair settlement outside of the courtroom. There's no court personnel involved, and they come to a settlement, nothing happens. Next is the case is presented to a malpractice arbitration panel, and this panel is the one that gets to decide kind of what happens with the malpractice case. And if all else fails, they can bring it to court and try it in front of a judge and a jury. To prove somebody committed malpractice, there's a couple steps you have to take. So you have to first prove that the nurse had a duty. And basically, a duty means that the nurse had a legal obligation to act within reasonable care towards the patient. So the nurse had these job description duties that they need to do. Then there's breach of
considerations.
Yes.
Big time in legal.
If the next step is breach of duty. So this is proving that the nurse didn't do what they were supposed to be doing. They didn't ethically uphold their duties. Then we have causation, which is proving that the nurse didn't act within that reasonable duty of care and caused harm. And then finally, damages is where the plaintiff is actually showing that they suffered harm or loss because of that nurse's actions. The Nurses Service Organization, NSO, it's a nursing insurance company. They explained that last year, a very large portion of malpractice claims were actually due to medication errors, where nurses were trying to like find workarounds for meds. They were trying to, not document here or override documentation there. So just be very careful about what you're doing. Now we have the regulation of nursing practice. So we have a regulatory board here in Massachusetts. It's called the Mass Board of Registration in Nursing. And basically what they do is they release what's called the Nurse Practice Acts. The Nurse Practice Acts are a law, and the law defines what we as nurses can do. It's called our scope of practice. We cannot practice outside of our scope of practice because we can get in trouble for that. We can be legally held responsible. So, for example, we cannot perform a tracheostomy on somebody, but we can perform trach care. So, we are supposed to know what's within our scope of practice. You might hear people going, oh, well, that's not within my scope of practice. Listen to them. If a doctor asks you to do something, make sure it's within your scope of practice. On the other side, we have standards of nursing. So, standards of nursing are not laws, but they're actually just guidelines set by professional nursing organizations like the ANA, the American Nurses Association. And basically, these standards provide like ethical guidelines for us to follow. If we break them, we're not going to be punished by law, but we can be held accountable for them. So, just be mindful of that. Another thing that helps us maintain our regulation of practice, you might hear about accreditation in colleges. When you go to take your NCLEX, you have to prove that you came from an accredited college because basically what it does is it shows that you have the minimum expertise to sit for the boards. And speaking of the boards, the NCLEX, you have to pass the NCLEX to be able to practice. The NCLEX shows that you have the minimum knowledge to practice safely as a nurse. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. Do you guys think that you are a nurse because you passed nursing school, or you're a nurse because you passed the NCLEX? Can you safely practice as a nurse just passing nursing school, or do you have to pass the NCLEX?
What makes you a nurse?
The NCLEX. Because once you have a license, you can safely provide care. You can pass nursing school and work in other fields, but you cannot practice safely and provide care as a nurse until you pass the NCLEX. So I would remember that. In addition to passing the NCLEX, you can have certifications. So when I graduated school, I started working in the emergency department. If I work there for a couple more years, I might go for what's called my CEN, my Certified Emergency Nurse certification. And basically, it just shows proficiency in the area that I am working. It's some hospitals pay you for it, some hospitals don't, but it's a really good thing to have because it shows that you know what you're doing. And, it looks really good on resumes too. You got your license, you worked really hard for it, you start working, don't lose your license. You put in all this time and effort. There's a lot of things you can do to lose your license, unfortunately. The first is documented criminal activity. If you're out there in the community breaking laws, that can get back to you. It doesn't have to be dealing with nursing, but if you're out there doing stuff that you're not supposed to do and you get in trouble for it, it can affect your license. Another one's deceptive practices. So there's a couple things that go into that. So first is like falsifying records. If you're signing a patient's name and they didn't want to sign their name, documented care that you didn't perform. So say you did wound care, or you didn't do wound care, but you documented that you did. That's an issue. And then also misrepresenting your qualifications. So say you're a CNA and then you go into your patient's room and you go, "Hi, my name is Bree. I'm going to be your nurse today." And then the whole day you pretend to be their nurse. That's misrepresenting your qualifications. That's deceiving the patient. You can't do that. You can lose your license because of it. Drug and alcohol abuse is a really, really big one that I want to focus on, and I want you guys to understand. So, as a nurse, you cannot practice under the influence. That includes drugs and alcohol. In the state of Massachusetts, weed is legal. You cannot be under the influence of weed while you're at work. You work under a national license. You don't work under a state license. So if your employer decides to drug test you and you pop positive for marijuana, they could potentially revoke your license depending on the situation. Like I said, you are a nationally certified nurse. You're not a state certified, so just be cognizant of that. Alcohol abuse is really common in nurses as well. The American Addiction Center explained that 18% of nurses actually qualified for a full blown substance abuse disorder because of the stress that they're under. Nursing is really, really stressful. You guys are gonna be facing challenges that you might have not faced before. So check on your coworkers, check on your friends, check on yourself. There are many resources available for nurses struggling with substance abuse disorders. So just kind of reach out to them. I've worked as a nurse for 3 years. I've watched two nurses get fired for abusing alcohol on the job. I've watched three coworkers get fired for drug issues. So you just you gotta be careful.
I've been a nurse for 20 years and I've had three of my nursing coworkers die of a drug overdose. All three of them were nurses and one of them trained me. So it's very prevalent. I would remember that.
Besides that, we have previous disciplinary action. If you got your license suspended prior, you got to be careful. If you keep making careless mistakes, they can potentially take your license from you again. We have gross or ordinary negligence, which is what we kind of covered before. And then we have physical or mental impairment. So as you age, if for some God forbidden reason you develop dementia and you can no longer safely care for your patient, you could potentially lose your license because of it. So when you are potentially going to lose your license, it's not like a, hey, we're going to take this from you and that's it. There's a formal process you have to go through. The first one is the notice of investigation. So basically, a complaint is filed by somebody. It could be your coworker, it can be a family member, it could be a patient's family member, it can be anybody. It can be anybody, and you are notified of that investigation. Then you go to a fair and impartial hearing. So that's when the Mass State Board completes the hearing for you. It allows you to respond to these allegations with a legal team. You meet with your attorney, they talk you through it, you go through the hearing. And then you get to the final decision. So the final decision is whether or not there's disciplinary action pursued. If there's no disciplinary action pursued, then great, you get your license back, you go back to work, nothing happens. If there is disciplinary action pursued, that is carried out, and then you, depending on the situation and the state that you work in, you might be able to reapply for your license at a later time. So nurses have numerous places in the legal process. So we'll start with nurses as a defendant. So when you are the one being accused of something, it's really important that you work really closely with your attorney. Their job is to help you keep your license and avoid punishment if at all possible, or at least minimize that. So work with them, do what they tell you to do. Don't discuss your case with anybody. Don't discuss it with anybody at work, your coworkers, your manager. Don't discuss it with your friends, your family, nothing like that. The more you talk about it, the more they potentially get out. Do not alter patients' records. So if you get notified that you're being brought to court over Miss Smith's case from last week and you go into her chart, they can bring that against you. You cannot try to cover stuff up. They will find it, they will bring it against you, and it'll get you in more trouble. So don't touch the patient's chart after you find out that something's happening. Be prepared to stand on the witness stand. So come with notes. If they ask you questions you don't know, be honest with them and cooperate. And that's going to be kind of your best option during a court case. Don't be disrespectful. Don't come in swearing. The more you cooperate and the more respectful you are, the better the outcomes usually are. On the opposite side, there's nurses as a witness. So, first, we have nurses as a fact witness. So, these nurses base their testimony only on firsthand knowledge of the incident. So, 3 months into me being a brand new grad nurse in the ER, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had a gunshot victim come into the ER. It became my patient. I was the primary nurse on the patient's case, and we stabilized them and shipped them out to Bay State. And about 2 to 3 weeks after that, I got a letter in the mail saying I was being brought to court as a witness of the situation. They wanted me to stand up there and talk about like what happened, what I saw when the patient rolled in on the ambulance, and then what we did and how we shipped him out. Luckily, I did not get brought to court over it. I was terrified as a brand new nurse. So, but they dropped the case, so I didn't have to go. But that's just kind of an example of how you might get pulled to court. And You could be a nurse of 3 days, 3 months, 3 years. You can be pulled to court anytime. The other one is a nurse as an expert witness. So this is a nurse who might have not seen what happened, but they can look into the patient's chart and they can determine whether acceptable nursing care standards were met. So, in order to do this, you have to be an expert in that field. So, they have legal nurses specifically that do this. Their job is literally to work in law and in nursing. And it's a really interesting kind of concept. So, think about that as an option. You don't necessarily have to go into patient care, you could be a legal nurse. There's a lot of laws that affect nursing practice. This is not nearly all of them. This is only just like a small portion of them. So we'll kind of go through those. First is controlled substances. So as nurses, we give controlled substances to many of our patients. So we have laws governing like how we give them, how we lock them up, all that kind of stuff, how we count them. And basically, it's just to help make sure our patients stay safe and we stay safe. We have the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. Basically, that sets legal standards to make sure our healthcare environment is safe for us as employees. That includes like isolation protocols for sick patients, radiation safety protocols, basically, just make sure we're safe as healthcare professionals. We have the National Practitioner Data Bank. So this is a bank full of providers, nurses, doctors, anybody with a license that works in healthcare that has engaged in professional misconduct in the healthcare field. And basically, what it does is it stores you. And say you want to go practice in Michigan and you've been practicing in Mass and you committed something in Mass. When you move to Michigan, they can look you up and it holds you accountable for what you did. And it also like keeps your employers up to date on what's going on. We have the ADA Act. Basically, we use that every single day. We want to make sure we treat individuals with disabilities fair and equally. We have the Nursing Home Reform Act of 1987. Basically, this prevents long term care facility residents from being physically or chemically restrained for the purpose of making our jobs easier. So prior to this, oftentimes nursing home employees were like restraining or chemically sedating patients, so that way they wouldn't have to deal with them the whole shift. Obviously, you can't do that, and now there's an act about it. We have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, so that protects employees against discrimination. It also protects pregnant individuals and allows them to receive the same rights as regular non-pregnant individuals. And then it also enforces the discipline of sexual harassment within the workplace. And then finally, we have wills. So wills just explain to us healthcare providers who will handle the individual after they pass and all of their property and assets.
Can anybody see your license? Like if you're under suspicion of being suspended, or if you're under review, or if your license is revoked, can anybody see that information? What do you think? Absolutely, they can. All they have to do is go on to the Board of Registration in whatever state that you're registered in, type in your name, and if your license is suspended or if it's active, they can look your information up. It's public knowledge. So be aware of that.
That data bank also gives information as to your license number, as well as like the town that you're registered as when you apply for your license. All right, so lastly, we have student liability. So you guys as students are held to the same standards as me as a nurse. When you go into the clinical setting, even though you might be under me as a clinical instructor, you're still responsible for your own actions. You are still responsible to know the facility's procedures and policies, and you should obviously not break them. Despite being under my license when you're practicing, because you guys don't have your own license, you're still going to be, held responsible. If you make an error, we can work through that error, but you're responsible for that error. Some schools require students to carry personal professional liability insurance. Some schools don't. It just kind of depends. You guys are under the school's insurance, so you don't have to worry about it. But a lot of like NP programs or like master's programs like mine, I have to have personal protection liability insurance. But like I said, just be responsible for your own actions and make smart decisions.
When you guys start practicing, the National League of Nurses, or NLN, they offer liability insurance. If you do decide to purchase that, do not tell people how much you're insured for. Don't do that. I think it's like $100 for like 3 million or something like that a year, but don't tell people that you have that. Okay.
You want to have insurance, but keep it private.
Yep.
Do you
Because
guys?
they'll also help, like if you do get sued or something happens, or somebody brings some sort of allegation, they will help you get a lawyer, and like kind of help you work through that. If you work for a hospital that has a union, their union lawyers will step in as well, as long as you follow the rules and you weren't deemed negligent.
All right. Do you guys have any questions about legal issues? No? All right, so now I'm gonna have you guys work on a case study. I'm gonna have you guys pair up in partners of two, and we'll probably do like 10 minutes to work through the case study, and then we'll talk about it after.
Can I mention one more thing? You guys are all at that age too. I know college is exciting and everybody wants to go, and like when spring break happens and they want to get together with friends and stuff like that. Please be mindful of why you're in school, because people look at that. If you get in an altercation and somebody presses charges against you, your license or your ability to sit for your license can be revoked. You get a DUI, your ability to sit for your license can be revoked as well. Doesn't matter when it happens. So always, now that you're in this profession,